I'm Christine Irons. I will be running this webinar with you, the Harness the Power of Excel's Data Analytics. Welcome everyone. I was just looking at the participant list and it's exciting. I see a bunch of new names that I haven't seen before, and I see a bunch of you that have attended some of the webinars. Some of them were, I know you were in my Teams webinar last month, so nice to see you guys again. I have my chat screen over here. So I'll be hosting and presenting this webinar again. And like usual, what I'm going to do just before we dive into the webinar, I am first of all going to introduce myself to people that have not been in the webinar before. So I work with CompuEase and Great Canadian Training. I'll explain what these two companies are in a minute.
Christine, I don't mean to cut you off, but we're still seeing the YouTube screen. It didn't switch over to your presentation.
Is that? Let me just check here. One sec. I just shared screen in Zoom, so I don't know why it would. Okay, let's see here. Share. Do it again. Screen 2. Do you see it yet?
Yeah, we got it. Thanks.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay, so I've been working for Great Canadian Training and CompuEase. It's actually, time goes by so fast, it's amazing. It's been over 3 years. We might be even going on 3.5 years. And before working here in Ottawa for CompuEase and Great Canadian Training, I was in Toronto. I worked at York University. We taught the faculty and staff all the technical courses. So I was teaching courses, designing software, running help desk. And I'm basically doing the same thing now. So I'm teaching the technical courses. I'm an instructional designer, trainer, learning specialist. And when I'm not teaching, as you guys that have been webinars know, I'm singing. That is my life, teaching and singing. So I'm the lead singer of the Ottawa-based SOS the ABBA experience. And guys, we're starting up again. We've actually got shows booked. So actually one coming up in 3 weeks. So it's getting really exciting, lots of rehearsals. So teach, sing, that's my life. Okay. So if anybody here is new to Zoom, the one big thing I'll point out to you with Zoom is that somewhere on your screen, it could be up at the top, if you just mouse around, you should see a little control toolbar that looks like what I'm pointing to over here on the right. And there's a little chat button there. I would suggest loading the chat so you can ask questions. And if you need any kind of technical support, or if there are any technical issues, Melanie's here. You just heard her voice a minute ago. Just pop it into the chat and Melanie will help you all out. For the questions, definitely put them in the chat. You don't have to wait until the end, even though I'll give you a bit of time at the end to put them in. But, you know, if you think of something in the middle of training, put it in the chat. It's just that I won't deal with the questions until we get to the end, just so we can run this webinar smoothly from beginning to end. Once we get to the end, I'll give you an opportunity to add more questions if you have them, and then I will go through all the questions. You know, if there's a question that I can't answer, because none of us know everything, but if there's a question that I can't answer, I will get the answer for you and we will send you a message. So in the end, all your questions will be answered. If something happens and you get disconnected, internet drops or whatever, just connect to the meeting again. And if you have, if you've connected through your cell phone, just dial in again. It'll just pick up where we are. Okay, so you can reconnect. Just a couple of quick slides. The two companies that I've been talking about, Great Canadian Training and CompuEase, they're sister companies. So they have the same owners, they're sister companies. One of the big differences is where you're located when you're booking the training. So if you're living in Ottawa or the Quebec area, you're going to go through CompuEase. Like CompuEase has been around for a long time, 30 years. So we're keeping the name CompuEase. But that's the Ottawa and Quebec area people. Anywhere else in Canada or the United States, or actually anywhere in the world now we're trading, you go through Great Canadian Training, but all the same people, same staff, same trainers, everything. But we provide both online and public on-site courses, online, on-site, and at your site courses, private, public. CompuEase does have a training facility downtown Ottawa, really beautiful training facility, brand new training facility. It's not open right now, as you know, but hopefully it'll open soon. So if you want to actually come to the facility to do training, you can, or you can do, you can request that we go on site if you want to do some private training. And you can also take the courses online, and it's always with a live instructor. So you'll always join a class and be part of a class where you could ask questions, talk to the instructor, talk to the participants. And then not only do we teach courses, but we offer consulting for anything you need, consulting services, and we offer database development services. So lots and lots of services. And so many reasons that I could suggest to take training or consulting or database services with us. But the one that I always point out to you guys that stands out to me, because I've actually had so many people in my classes mention this to me when I'm teaching the class. The one that stands out to me is our classes, the public classes that we run, are always guaranteed to run. You will never get a cancellation notice. So you'll get the opportunity if you want. If you happen to be the only one in the class and you would prefer to be with a larger class, you'll have the opportunity to switch to the next upcoming class with other people. But we'll do a one-on-one with you. It's like you'll never receive a cancellation, which is fantastic. You can guarantee it. Put it in your calendar. It's there. Okay, but so many reasons. We do the software trading. So we teach all the Microsoft products, the Adobe products, like the Acrobat, Dreamweaver. I took a Photoshop. I think I took a different one too, but I did take the Photoshop training. That was fun. And then we do other things like the programming and specialty kind of training. Like if you want to do VBA, actually, I took Excel VBA as well. That was a good course to automate things. And if you don't see something on the website, like if you're looking for a specific application and you go to our website, either one, CompuEase or Great Canadian Training, it doesn't matter, and you don't see what you're looking for, don't assume that we don't teach it or that we can't get instructors to teach it. Just reach out to us, send us a message, call us, whatever. Okay, so don't assume because it's on the website or not on the website, it's not there. Plus, keep visiting the website because we're always adding new courses. We're always updating it, so keep visiting. We do the professional skills training as well. So things like your time management, team building, project management. We have a great facilitator, Joel. Everybody loves them when they take the courses with him. It's great if you want to do, well, we offer them publicly, but we also offer private, which is great for, you know, a group of you that work together on projects to do professional skills training together. It's beautiful. Okay, so that was a little bit about the company. I hope you don't think that I'm trying to talk fast and rush, but this webinar is there's a lot in this webinar because I'm going to talk about what Power BI is. I know there's a good chance that a lot of you guys in this webinar have no idea. You might have heard the terms before, but you have no idea what it is. And that's kind of what this webinar is about, to introduce you to what these things are about, to see if you could actually use it in your job, in your daily life, if you want to take training. But, you know, like the PowerQuery, the Power Pivot that I'm going to talk about, the dashboards, pivot tables, all that kind of stuff, you know, it's training that covers days and days worth of training, depending on what you take. I'm trying to pack it into a webinar right now and give you an idea of what they all are. So I'm going to talk about what Power BI is, just to give you an idea. Then we're going to talk about what Power Query is specifically, which is part of Power BI. We're going to talk about what Power Pivot is, which is part of Power BI. And we're going to talk about dashboards, a little bit on dashboards. I already did a webinar, by the way, on dashboards. If it's something that you want to see, you could go to our webpage or go to our YouTube channel, and there is a dashboards webinar, and I'll talk about the courses for that. But I wanted to include that to show you how you can kind of use Power Query, Power Pivot together, and then sort of put it into a very simple little dashboard, just to give you an idea of how they work together. But because this is kind of action-packed, oh, you've never used it, eh, Chris? Okay, because it's action-packed, I'm going to have to move quickly. I'm going to have to assume that you guys know certain things about Excel. Like when we get to me throwing it together into a dashboard, I'm going to create a couple of pivot tables, but this is not a pivot tables webinar. So I'm going to have to assume that you know pivot tables. I'll do them kind of on my screen. You'll see what I'm doing just so that I can put them into a dashboard. We offer all that training. Okay, I'll point it out at the end of the webinar. Okay, so don't kind of panic about learning what I'm doing. This is giving you an overview. All right. So let's start with Power BI. What is Power BI? By the way, BI stands for business intelligence. Okay, Power BI. Actually, I might as well just, you don't need to see me through all this. I get boring. So what is Power BI? So yes, you can rewatch the video, Chris. Good point. So yeah, if I'm moving fast and you need to go back to something I've talked about, that's a really good point. You're going to get access to the video. Because you're in the webinar, they're going to send you the video or a link to the video. You can go to our website, go to YouTube, and yeah, you can pause it and go back. Yeah, very, very good point. So what is Power BI? Power BI, like I said, stands for business intelligence. It's a set of business intelligence tools to allow you to work with your data, clean up your data, transform your data, which I'll talk a bit more about in a second, and then present your data, summarize it in pivot tables, pivot charts, whatever you want to do after you've cleaned it all up and worked with it, massaged it, present it in a report format so that you can share it with other people. You could share it on, public websites, different ways that you can share it. But Power BI encompasses Power Query, Power Pivot, Power View, and Power Map. Now, there is a desktop version of Power BI. So outside of Excel, let's put Excel aside. You can actually go on, I put the website here if you wanted to write down the website, or you can refer to the video again, like Chris said. You can actually go to this website. You can download a free version of Power BI. The free version of Power BI desktop is great for small to medium businesses. If you need something far more powerful in the way of publishing everything you've done, you can get a subscription service to it. But the free version is great. So you can install it and you can have the desktop version. So you're working outside of Excel, not even in Excel. But these tools are also available inside Excel. So today I'm going to be showing you how to access Power Query inside Excel and use it, and how to access Power Pivot inside Excel. So I'm not going to actually be working with the full desktop version, but it is available. I wanted to point it out to you. Okay. So what is Power Query? Power Query. Oh, it's like I just put together a Power Query course. It's going to be offered starting in September. So I really had to kind of learn it inside and out. I love Power Query. I used to teach, well, I still teach Power Pivot. I thought Power Pivot was sort of the be all end all. Power Query, oh my gosh. What it does is it allows you to connect to data that's, well, I was going to say data that's outside Excel, like access databases. Maybe a coworker of yours has an access database with data in it, other databases. You can see the whole list here. Online data sources, like if you have a SurveyMonkey account, maybe you're collecting information through SurveyMonkey, things that are filled in online, LinkedIn, Facebook, all those that can connect to data or collect data, as well as other Excel files. You can connect to these, bring the data into your Excel, massage the data. So you bring it into Excel through PowerQuery, and I'll show you this PowerQuery editor. You can clean up the data, because when you bring in data from other sources, it's not necessarily in a great format to be able to use it to summarize, like with pivot tables and pivot charts. And you end up doing a lot of cleaning, like you delete columns you don't need, you format certain columns, you create calculations, you reorganize things, you merge things, you do a lot of transformation with your data, and then you can summarize it. You can do this in PowerQuery, but the really cool thing is that when you do your cleanup and transformation, Excel remembers all your steps like a macro. It remembers the steps, which means if you have to keep adding data to your existing data, it cleans that data up for you in a second. You don't have to go through the steps anymore. All you do is just add the extra data and it goes boom, everything's all cleaned up. It's beautiful. And then once it's all cleaned up, then you have a choice. Because you're working in the PowerQuery editor, you can choose to then take all that data that you just cleaned up and put it back onto your Excel spreadsheet. Or you can send it to the data model window, which is Power Pivot. And we're going to get to Power Pivot in a minute. So it can output to an Excel spreadsheet, and then you can do whatever you want with it, or you can put it into Power Pivot. Okay, you'll see this. I'm going to give you an example. Like, there's so many examples I could give you of how to use Power Pivot. I just chose one example and I'll show you. Power Pivot is, again, it's part of Excel. And when you work in Power Pivot, you work in what's called a data model window. So even though you're in Excel and you're in an Excel spreadsheet, you're going to see a separate window open up called a data model window. And the idea behind Power Pivot is it lets you work with huge amounts of data. So there's a limit with Excel of just over 1 million rows on an Excel spreadsheet. Power Pivot lets you work with hundreds of millions of rows of data. So if you're getting it from another source that has tons of rows of data, Power Pivot, you can put it into Power Pivot and it's going to be fast working with the data. Like the other day, I was working with a spreadsheet that had 60,000 rows and I was pulling my hair out. I was deleting a column and I was sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting for the column to delete. And then it would delete. And then I wanted to delete another one and I waited and I waited. You won't get that with Power Pivot. It speeds things up. The other thing about Power Pivot is it lets you work with your data in an unflattened mode. Okay. What I mean by flattening your data, which is what you really don't want to do, is if you look at this example I have here, suppose you had a spreadsheet that kept track of all your customers. Okay, I know this doesn't look like a spreadsheet, but suppose you had a spreadsheet that kept track of all your customers, a spreadsheet that kept track of the products you sell, another spreadsheet that kept track of your sales. What a lot of people do, because they want to create pivot tables and, summarize data with it all together. They want to grab customers from the customer sheet, products from the product sheet, and sale information from the sales. What they do is they end up combining all the data into one spreadsheet, which is a pain to do with VLOOKUPs and everything that you have to do. They combine it onto one sheet so that they can create their pivot tables and summarize it. That's called flattening your data. It's very inefficient. It's not a good way to work with your data. You're actually better off leaving your data on separate sheets or separate sources and then telling Excel how they're connected so that you can connect them and create a pivot table based on those separate sheets. So you leave them as separate sheets, but you can still create pivot tables. Power Pivot lets you do that. So you work with large amounts of data. You don't flatten your data, which is good. It speeds up working with large amounts of data. And it also offers these really powerful functions called DAX functions. So there's regular functions in Excel, like you work with sum, average, that type of thing. DAX has those functions, or sorry, Power Pivot has those functions, but they also have these special functions called DAX functions that you don't have in regular Excel. And they can do some powerful things that you can't do in regular Excel. Like there's one DAX function called related. Related is like VLOOKUP on steroids. So if any of you guys use VLOOKUP, you would go nuts over this related function. Every time I teach it in Power Pivot, people just can't believe it. So there's so many benefits to Power Pivot. But we're going to start with Power Query first, then we'll move into Power Pivot. And then we'll just put it together in a simple little dashboard, okay? So like I said, I have a ton of examples that I could give you, reasons to use Power Query, different things that it can do. It can do so much. I'm just going to choose one example to show you so that I can show you the Power Query editor. You can see what it looks like. You can see the transformations I'm making and how it remembers the steps. And then we'll put it into Power Pivot so you can see Power Pivot, and then we'll do the little dashboard. So right now I'm in an Excel workbook, just a blank workbook. Now, I could start with an Excel workbook that already has data in it, and I could take that data and put it into Power Query. I'm choosing to start with a blank Excel workbook. And the example that I'm going to give you, actually, I'll show you here. I have a folder called sales. Okay, I'm going to open the folder to show you what's in it. I have 3 Excel files. So I keep track of my sales. And every year I have a separate workbook. So I have my 2017 sales, 2018, 2019 sales. Soon the 2020 will be coming in as well. Let me show you what the sales 2017 looks like. And really, basically, they all look the same. They have the same columns, the same headers. Now, what I'm about to show you, you actually don't have to name your headings exactly the same across all the workbooks, but it's good practice. If the workbooks are the same, name your column headers the same. So if it's order number year or order date, always call it order date in all your workbooks. That's good practice, but you could call it date. It's just that in most cases, Excel's smart enough to figure out when you combine spreadsheets together that it can usually figure out the columns, but it might get mixed up because we have 2 dates here, 2 columns for dates. If you just called one order date and the other one just date in another workbook, it might get confused. It's pretty smart though. But this is what it looks like. So these are our sales. We have the dates, the ship dates. We have customers that place orders. They order certain products, unit prices. Okay, that all 3 sheets look the same, but this is my 2017 data. Okay, I'm going to close it. They all look the same. Now, what I want to do is I want to combine these 3 sheets together. Now, this, by the way, is not flattening your data. Flattening your data means you have different subjects that you try to put together. So you have customer information, you have sale information, you have product information, 3 completely different subjects that you want to combine onto one sheet. This is different than you have identical sheets, which really probably should have been one workbook and you just continue your 2017 sales into your 2018, 2019. Probably that's would have been the best way to organize it, but whoever did this didn't do that. And they like to do it in separate workbooks per year. So what I want to do is I want to leave these workbooks as separate years, okay? But I also want to be able to see them combined into one so that I can create pivot tables based on all the years combined. Power Query is going to let me do that. It's going to let me keep these as separate files, but in Power Query, it's going to put them together as if they were one file. Plus, I can clean everything up as well because there's certain things I want to clean up. So I'm going to start with an blank Excel workbook. Now, the nice thing is if you're in 2016 or higher, like 2016 or 365, they've now added PowerQuery to your data ribbon. If I go to my data ribbon here, this whole area here at the beginning of the ribbon all has to do with PowerQuery. They call it get and transform data, but that's PowerQuery. If you're in 2013 or earlier, it's an add-in. And I'll show you with Power Pivot. I'll add Power Pivot. It's an add-in. I'll show you how to do that later. But 2016, you don't have to add it. It's all here. So you can connect to a bunch of different data sources like I showed you in that PowerPoint slide, databases, other Excel files, online data sources. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click Get Data. I'm going to go to From File. There are so many options, but From File. And I'm going to point to a folder that contains all the files that I want to combine into one. So I'll choose From Folder. I put it on my desktop, data analytics. Okay, there's my sales folder. It doesn't matter. You can double click it if you want, or you can single click it and click open. It'll work both ways. And you will get this dialog box that shows you that it found 3 Excel files. And by the way, if you have other files in that folder that are not Excel files, maybe you have some pictures or something, it would list them here, but you can tell Excel to ignore anything that is a JPEG or whatever so that it just sees Excel files. You can actually go that far, but I only have those 3 Excel files. Now down at the bottom, there's a combine button, there's a load button, and there's a transform data. So remember I was telling you that you can clean up your data and then you can load it somewhere. So load it into Excel or load it into Power Pivot. So there's transform, which is clean up, and then there's load. Where are you going to put it after that? If you're just loading all 3 of these together into Excel and you don't care about cleaning it up, you can use the load option. If you need to transform your data, you can click transform, clean it up. I'm actually combining all 3 and transforming. So I'm actually going to click the drop down for combine. So we're going to combine all 3 together and we're going to clean it up. Now, one thing that's important, you have to make sure that the Excel workbooks that you're combining, the data is on the same sheet, like the sheet name is called the same. So in all 3 of my workbooks, they're called sheet 1. That is one thing that's important. So I did make sure that they were all sheet 1. So I just have to click on sheet 1 and say that's what the sheet's called. Just in case some of your workbooks have other sheets, Excel needs to know which sheet. And then click OK. And give it a sec. It's going to throw us into the PowerQuery editor in a minute. So it's still part of this workbook. We're not going to be leaving this workbook. We're just in a separate little window for now. This is called the PowerQuery editor. And the PowerQuery editor, over here on the left, I collapsed the left side. It's not so important to you during this webinar, but I'll just show you. PowerQuery has already created some queries to combine the data and put it into this editor. This is what you're seeing here. I'm just going to collapse that. But it's now also creating another query for me called sales. If I click on sales, and I could rename this if I want, but the query is called sales. And as I start to clean this up, the sales query is going to remember every single step I make. So when I add the 2020 Excel workbook to that folder that I showed you, it will automatically combine it with this and clean it all up for me. And you can actually have several queries in the same workbook. Right now, we only have one query called sales. Now I'm clicked on the query, and if you look way over at the right, it already has a bunch of steps that it's taken. So Excel had to create its own steps to be able to combine this data already into this one sheet. So the steps are there, but as I start cleaning it up myself, you're going to see over here on the right, it's going to add step by step by step by step, almost like a macro. If any of you have done a macro, it's remembering the steps. I'll show you when we start to do it. And then of course our spreadsheet in the middle. If your spreadsheets, if they're really, really big, it will only show you the first 1,000 rows. So even if you have 60,000 rows between the 3 workbooks, this is just sample data that you're working with, and it will show you up to 1,000 rows. So you're not actually working with the data anyway. It doesn't really matter that much. If you only see 1,000 rows, you can still work with this to clean it up. And then the ribbons that you have up top here, the home and the transform ribbons, these are all your cleanup buttons, all the things that you need to do to work with this to clean it up. You will see some repeats, by the way. So some buttons that are on home, you'll also see on transform. Okay, so you will see some repeats. I find right clicking really gets you far. So I do a lot of right clicking, you'll see. The add column, which I'll show you in a couple of minutes, it cleans things up, but whatever you're cleaning up or whatever you're doing, it puts into a new column rather than edit an existing column. So home and transform, when you use these buttons, you're using it on an existing column, whereas add column is a way of adding an extra column and doing something like a calculation in that extra column. View is just different ways you're viewing the screen. Like there is a formula bar. There's something called M code in PowerQuery that you wouldn't get into unless you're doing really advanced PowerQuery. So I'm usually not showing my formula bar. There's no need to have it here for the webinar. So it's just different ways of viewing your screen. So I'll go back to the home screen or the home ribbon. So I'm looking at my data, and let me do some cleaning up here. And there's, like I said, I can do so much more than what I'm about to show you, but you'll always get a first column that gives you row by row the name of the workbook that these rows of data came in. So remember, we had the sales 2017, sales 2018, sales whatever. Sometimes I keep that column, but it's not really that necessary, I find, in most cases. So I'm going to remove that column. So I'm going to click on the column header, and even though I'm working with the 2017 sample data, it will do this for 2018 and 2019. And there is a remove columns button on your home ribbon, but like I said, I right click and I go to remove. And as soon as I do that, look over here at your query steps, it removed a column. And if you want, you can even right click your little query steps here and you can rename them so that these steps make sense to you, exactly what you did or exactly what column you removed. Here we have a column, order number year. Somebody's combined the order number with the year of the sale. I want to separate these two. So I want a separate column for order number and a separate column for year. You can split the columns. And again, there's a split column button on the home ribbon, or you can right click, go down to split column. And I'm going to split the column by delimiter, meaning I'm going to tell Excel that there's something that it can look for to do its split. And if you look at all this data, there's a space dash space. So I want to tell Excel that what's on the left of the space dash space will be one column, the order number. What's on the right of the space dash space will be the year. So create a separate column for year. So it's delimited by a space dash space. So I'm going to choose, where do my split columns go? By delimiter. Quite often it's delimited by a comma or a tab or something, a space, but I'm actually going to choose, instead of space, custom. And here I'm going to put a dash space dash. Whoops, I'm doing it backwards. Space dash space. That's my dyslexia kicking in. That's how it's separated. So I'll click OK. And boom, there it is. And I really don't need this order number column because I already have the order number. So I'm going to right click that heading and I'm going to remove it. Then I'm going to rename this column. So I'll double click up here and I'll call this, how about sale year? So you can rename columns and look at this. Every step I'm doing, it's going here. It's remembering this. How about a couple of calculations? So let's say over here, I have my total product cost, which is how much it costs me to make the product, and then the sale amount. So how much we sell the product for. I want to know what my profit is, which will be the sale amount minus the total product cost. Now, it's important. I won't be using a function or a formula like I would teach you in Excel. I'm going to use a button and a menu system to do this. It's important the order that you select the columns that you want to perform a calculation on. Since it's the sale amount minus total product cost, first I select the sale amount column. So I'll click on the heading. Then I'll hold the control key on my keyboard so I can multi-select columns, and I'll select total product cost. So these are the two I need in my calculation. And I want this calculation to go into a new column. So I'm going to go up to add column. And then there's a button here that says standard. These are just your standard plus, minus, multiplication, division options. And I'm going to subtract. And there's your calculation. And I'm going to rename this. I'll call this profit. And maybe I'll move this column. And you know what it's like trying to reorganize your columns on a regular Excel spreadsheet. You can't just drag and drop them. Well, here you can. I can drag profit. Maybe I'll put it over here. Just like that. And by the way, with all these steps, if there's a step that you want to get rid of that you don't need, if you mouse over these steps, you see a little X here. So this last one that I did, if I were to click the X, it's going to stick my profit back at the end. You ready? Goes right back here again. But I really wanted to do that, so I'll drag it here, wherever I put it, doesn't really matter. And you can reorganize these steps too. You can drag these steps around. Okay, I'll do one more calculation. So over here at the left, I have order date and ship date. I want to know how many days between these two dates. So it's ship date minus order date. So I'll select ship date, hold the control key, select order date. And then I'll go up to my add column ribbon. And this time I'm going to go to the button that says date. And I'm going to subtract days. And there you go again. There it is. I'm going to double click. I'll call this days to ship. Whoops. Days to ship. And maybe I'll move it over to where my dates are. Here. Okay, so I've done a lot of steps here. Now I need to get it out of this query editor window, and I'm going to have a couple of choices. One is I could throw it right back into Excel, which, you know what, I think for this purpose I'm going to do, because I want to show you what it looks like when it throws it into Excel. But the other option is I could just send it right to PowerPivot, to the data model window. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it into Excel, then I'll add it to the data model window. So if I go to the home ribbon, there's a close and load button. If I wanted to send it right to PowerPivot, I would choose close and load too, and then I would tell it to put it into the data model window. But I really do want to just add it to my Excel spreadsheet to show you. So I'm just going to choose close and load, and it knows I just want to put it in the Excel spreadsheet. So close and load. It gets me out of the query editor window. And there it is. It's now an Excel table in this workbook. And see over here on the right, it now has a query tied up to this Excel workbook. So if you ever need to get back into your query editor, you just double click over here on sales, and it will bring you back into your query editor. And then you can close and load, and you're back on your Excel spreadsheet. Now, what I would like to do is put this into PowerPivot, because This is my sales data. And by the way, it's all combined. Look, 2017, 2018, 2019. Oh, you know what I didn't do? Which, let me just see here. Yeah, we have a bunch of rows that have XXX. I'm going to edit my query the way I showed you. I don't want to see those rows. What we do is, these are our sales, but every once in a while I send out promotional material, and I don't want to log it as a sale, but I do want to log that I sent something out. So we'll put an XXX. I don't need these XXXs. So I'm going to go up to this little drop down. It's like the filter drop down. I'm going to scroll to the bottom and I'm going to say, I don't want the XXXs. Okay. And I'll close and load. And now they're gone from here. Okay. Now Power Pivot. So I've got my sales data here for all 3 years, but I also have a customers Excel workbook that lists all of our customers, their names, their addresses, their phone numbers, their genders, their occupations. I want to be able to create a pivot table that combines my customer information with my sales information. So I'm going to put this into Power Pivot as well as the customer spreadsheet. Now I need my Power Pivot ribbon. They did, by the way, on the data ribbon for 2016, they did add some options for Power Pivot. There's a button that says Manage Data Model, but I would suggest adding the Power Pivot ribbon. So you could always go to File, go down to Options, click Add-ins. Don't forget, you can go back to this video. Add-ins. Down at the bottom, you will find the Power Pivot ribbon under COM add-ins. And then you click Go. And there it is, Microsoft Power Pivot for Excel. It's not installing anything, by the way. So if any of you are with the government or whatever, and they restrict you installing things on your computer, I have never run a class for Power Pivot where somebody has not been able to load the Power Pivot ribbon. You're just adding a ribbon. And then you click OK. And now I have a Power Pivot ribbon. So if I go to my Power Pivot ribbon, I have my data here. I want to add this data to the Power Pivot data model window. So again, we're going to be in a different window in a minute, but I'll click Add to Data Model. And it's going to kind of look like Excel. Down here at the bottom, there's a sales sheet with all my sales information. Now I want to add the customers as well. So I'm in Power Pivot. I need to connect to my customers sheet. So up here are all the different ways I can connect to data sources, just like that Power Query. You'll find Excel under From Other Sources. I don't know why they bury this one really deep, but if I go down, it's an Excel file that has all of my customer data. I'm going to click Next. I have to browse for my customer file. There it is. I'll double click it. Use first row as column headers. So my first row in my Excel file has all my column headers, like, you know, name, address, phone. So I make sure I check that off. Next. There's only one sheet in that Excel workbook. It's called Customers. That's the one. I'll click Finish. And I'll close this window. So now here's my customers spreadsheet with their names, birth dates, genders, yearly incomes, occupations, lots of good stuff. And we have our sales sheet here with all our sale information. And notice, I'm going to point this out in a little bit as well, but on the customer sheet, every time we get a new customer, they get a customer number, something that uniquely identifies each customer. And then when a customer places a sale, so if I go to the sales sheet, as soon as they call in to buy a product, we list them by customer number on the sales sheet. So if I want to know who customer 100 is that ordered whatever product on whatever date, I could always go to the customer sheet, find customer 100, and oh, look at that. It's what, Lindsay Nath. She's actually placed several. Actually, I don't know why she's repeating in here. I'm going to have to figure that out. I have to look at this data. But you got sales and you have customers. That's odd. She shouldn't be repeating in here. Okay, we're gonna have to see what happens. Okay, I'm going to create a pivot table. Now we're gonna have a little bit of a problem, but we're gonna fix it. So up here I have a button, pivot table. It's going to throw me out of the data model window, put me back in my Excel workbook, and it's going to say, where do you want to put the pivot table? So I'm going to choose to put it on a new worksheet. I'll click OK. So I'm still in the same workbook. Over on the right, here are those two separate sheets, which you don't normally get when you're doing a regular pivot table. So I'll expand my customers and I'll say, I want to see this by occupation, and based on their occupations, the total sales. So I'll put the sales amount into the values. Now it does have an issue. We're seeing a sale amount repeat. I mean, the odds that clerical people, management people, they all have exactly the same amount of sales is not likely. You know what the issue is? Let me take you back to the data model window. So I'm still on my Power Pivot ribbon. I'm going to manage my data model window. It'll throw me right back in with those two sheets at the bottom. And in the data model window, I'm going to take you to way down the end here, diagram view. Now, of course, in our classes, we would explain this so much better so this all made sense to you. But we have two separate sheets here. Excel does not know how these two are connected. Even though I just told you that each customer has a customer number, and if we go to the sale and find that customer number in the sale, it's the same person. Excel doesn't know that. I have to tell Excel how these two separate sheets are connected by something that's common, which is customer number and customer number. They both list the customer number. So I'm going to drag customer number to customer number and tell Excel that's how they're linked. So customer 100 in the customers table is the same person in the sales table that ordered 10 products, customer 100. As soon as you make that link, your pivot table should work. So to get back to my Excel workbook, I could either go down to the bottom to the Excel icon because it's open. See the two windows, the data model window and the Excel workbook, or I seem to have a habit of going up here by the save button. There's a little Excel icon and it switches me. And look at that, my pivot table's working now. So I just combine information from two separate sheets. Okay, I'm going to create one more pivot table because I want to be able to at least put a couple of things on the dashboard. Normally, if I'm creating a dashboard, and I'll remind you, we did do the dashboards webinar, so I'm not getting really deep into a dashboard. But normally when I'm creating a dashboard, I usually put my pivot tables on separate sheets. But for this, I'm only going to do two pivot tables just so that we have something. We'll have a couple of charts that we can put on a dashboard. So I think I'm just going to put it on the same sheet, these pivot tables side by side. So I'll click on a blank cell. I'll go up to Insert, Pivot Table. I could go back to my data model window and click that pivot table button like I showed you before when we created this, but I don't have to. Insert, Pivot Table. I'm going to put it on the existing worksheet exactly where my cursor is. It's going to use this workbook's data model. It recognizes there's a data model in this workbook. I'll click OK. And there you go again. There are your two sheets. I could go to customers and this time say something like, let's do it by marital status. How about that? And again, maybe for the sales, I want to see the sales amount by marital status. So we have two pivot tables. Now what I'll do is I'll create charts based on those pivot tables. So I'll click in this first pivot table. I'll go up to my pivot table analyze ribbon and I'll create a pivot chart. I'll just leave it as a column chart. There's one of my charts. I'll give it a nice title. Like this really should be something like, this is sales by occupation. And I don't need any of these little filter buttons. I'll just right click them and remove them. Don't forget your charts, the things that go on your, whoops, probably chose the wrong option. The things that go on your dashboard should be very general. It's like a general overview of things. You don't want a lot of detail on your charts. Like I would even get rid of these little lines in the background. I would click on these lines and press delete. And we don't even need the legend. It's all one color anyway. Like I would clean up my charts a lot. And then I'll click in this little pivot table. Go up to my pivot table analyze ribbon, create a pivot chart. Maybe I'll do a pie chart this time. And the title will be, this one is sales by marital status. And I don't need these little gray filter buttons. I'll hide all field buttons on chart. Okay. So I want these on my dashboard. I'll create a separate sheet in this workbook, a new sheet. I'll call this sheet dashboard. Usually I would hide all the other sheets eventually. You don't usually have grid lines on a dashboard. So I would go up to view and I would remove the grid lines. And you can do a fill color in the background if you want a different color for your dashboard. I would put a title on my dashboard. Now, again, if you were in that webinar, I stressed so many times, anything that I put on my dashboard, I make sure it's a floating thing that I can drag and drop wherever I want it. I never click in a cell and start to type something because it gets anchored into the cell and then it's not easy to move it around or resize columns because everything underneath gets resized. So if I need to add a title to my dashboard, I do it as a text box. So it's a floating thing that I can drag and drop. So I go up to insert and down to text box. And I would drag out a text box up here and I'll just call it, how about sales performance dashboard. And I would want to make the font bigger. Something like that maybe. Plus, the other thing is with text boxes, it always puts a border on the text box. So what I usually do is I go up to the shape format ribbon, shape outline, and I tell it to put no outline so that when you click off of it, you can't even tell it's a text box, but I could click on it, click on the border, and I could drag and drop this anywhere I want it. I find this is the best way to work with your dashboards, little floating things like this. And then I could go to my sheet that has my charts and I usually cut the charts and then I put them on my dashboard. I don't usually make copies. I don't need a copy of the chart on the other sheet. I usually cut them. So then I go back again, click the chart, cut it, go back to my dashboard, paste it. Like I could create a really elaborate dashboard, but I really want to show you something. This is all based on the original data, right, that we have on the sales sheet, plus the customer sheet, which is in the data model window. Well, what happens when my 2020 data comes in? What happens to everything? Let's try it. I'll go back to my files and folders here. Remember, these are the 3 sheets we combined. Let me just go back a step here. They're all in the sales workbook or sales folder. Well, here's my 2020 data. I'm going to copy this into this folder. Maybe I'll just even drag and drop it. So now here's all my sales. And by the way, it's the old format with the columns that I didn't want, the information that was combined. Remember, I split it. It doesn't have any of the calculations that I did. It's all like just the regular format that 2017, 2018, 2019 is. But let's put this into the folder now. Plop. Come back here. It's not here yet. It only goes up to 2019, but all I have to do is go up to my little query ribbon that I have at the end, and there's a refresh button. I'm going to refresh. Ready? Now let's check it out. I'm scrolling down, 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 and oh, there's all my 2020, and it's all cleaned up for me. All the calculations are done. The data's split up. The columns that I didn't want are deleted. It's just automatically added. And if I go to my dashboard actually, you won't see much of it. You'll see the charts adjust a little bit, but you'll really see it if I go to the the pivot tables that they're based on. Keep your eye on this pivot table. It's still showing the older numbers, but if I go to the pivot table analyze ribbon, or I could even right click in here, but there is a refresh button. I'm going to click the drop down. Now keep your eye on these numbers. I'm going to refresh all. And everything's updated, which means my dashboard's updated. No, you know what? And I'm going to get to your questions. I just happened to see this question come in. No, I'm finding the refresh all doesn't. So if I go to you're probably talking about this sheet here. Even when you click refresh all, what it's doing is it's refreshing all the queries that are in your workbook, because I said you could have multiple queries. It refreshes all the queries, but it doesn't refresh the pivot tables that are based on those queries. So you have to refresh the pivot tables too. But that's all it took. So when my 2021 data comes in, I just put it in the folder, refresh, and everything's refreshed. So this kind of gives you a general idea of PowerQuery, Power Pivot, throwing it into a dashboard, how you can make your life easier, never having to do those steps. So what I'm going to do, I'm trying to get through this quickly because I can see we're running out of time and I want to be able to answer your questions. So start putting your questions in. While you're putting your questions in, I'll quickly show you the two websites that we have, the CompuEase and the Great Canadian Training websites. They're pretty similar. Right now I'm on the CompuEase website. If you're looking for courses, you go to course list. And look at this, we have the Power BI training, Power Pivot training, we have PowerQuery, we have dashboards, which right now is listed under Excel training. You'll find the dashboard training there. We have two different dashboards courses, by the way. We have a 1-day and a 2-day dashboard course. I advise, if you can, taking the 2-day. It will teach you so much more. I mean, the 1-day is good if that's all you could take, if that's all you can manage, but the 2-day will get you so much further. And if you want to do pivot table training, it's offered in Excel level 3. You can request custom pivot table training if you want. It's taught through dashboards. You get a lot of training in dashboards. You get a pivot table training in Power Pivot, because we do, like, the end result of Power Pivot is pivot tables. And if I go to the Great Canadian Training, it's basically the same thing. Courses, I'll go, Microsoft. We've got the Power BIs, all the Excel training, Power Pivot, Power Query under the Excel training. I mean, everything is there, and when I click on the links, it's very straightforward. More information and register. And by the way, I would suggest, guys, if you go to either one of these websites, keep checking out the free resources, because we have tons of free resources. We have podcasts, great podcasts on communication skills with Joel Silverstone. We have free downloads. We're always adding things to our free downloads, like tips and shortcuts and ribbons, special ribbons you can add. Here are our webinars. You can check out our webinars if you click register. So next month, by the way, I'll be teaching a webinar about Microsoft To Do, Microsoft Planner, and then using Planner and To Do inside Teams, if you guys use Teams. We have some really cool webinars coming up, like Tough Conversations Don't Get Easier, but You Can Get Better. The Definitive Guide to I'll be doing that one to your Actually, I'm doing that with Joy, the owner. We're co-hosting it. 5 things every SharePoint user should know. And there are multiple pages. You can go to page 2. So keep checking out our free resources. We have newsletters, blogs. Yeah, I get a lot of good stuff. Good free stuff. Okay, let me get to your questions. Let me see here. So let's see. So Chris says, for Power Query, can the folders be on someone else's cloud storage? If you have access to the other person's cloud storage, yes. Like if they've shared the files with you, then it asks you to browse for the file that you want to bring in PowerQuery. It should ask you, it should give you your files and folders. So if you've synced them, you should be able to access the stuff that people have shared with you. You should, but it has to have been shared with you. Could you use formulas to do calculations instead of using the menu like you did? Yeah, you know what, Menno, you can. And we teach some of that in the Power Query. So we'll teach you how to do that. It's very similar to if you've ever done formulas inside a data table, where you're using column headings in your formulas as opposed to cell references like A1 times A2. You actually use your column headings to do your formulas, and then it does it automatically all down your columns. But yes, you can. There are usually more categories for marital status. Yeah, I know. You know what? It's very true. And it's funny, when I was showing you, that's the thing that was going through my mind. I should actually add those. This is old data that we have. So you know what I mean? It's old data, and it's just marital status plus gender as well. All the different categories for gender, and all they have is the male, female. So I'm with you on that totally. So I would make sure that it was in there. I already answered about the refresh all. Chris says I put my refresh icon in my green. Oh, you know what Chris is talking about? If I go back to Excel, I don't know if you guys use this tiny little quick access toolbar at the top of your Excel workbook, where you've got your save and your undo. You can add icons to this that you use a lot. So yes, I could go to my query ribbon where my refresh button is, and I can right click it and add it to the quick access toolbar, and then it's there. You don't have to, like you saw me, Chris, right, flipping around the ribbons trying to find the refresh. It's always up on your quick access. Good point. I like your tips, Chris, in these. Do you offer Python program training? Python, it's not on our website. But I would be surprised if we couldn't find someone, because a lot of the people that teach the other programming that we offer, they know a lot of different programming languages. So reach out to us, and I will bet you that either one of them can work with you in Python, or we could find somebody. But it's not listed on the website. Chris, you like that, eh? Are there any other questions, guys? Like, I know it was a lot to get through. It's just that you can take the training. So if you're interested in PowerQuery, come to the PowerQuery course. I'll work with you. I'll teach it to you inside and out. There's Power Pivot, like I said, there's dashboards. Oh, I love the dashboards training. I told you that. Oh, thank you. Good, good. I hope you reach out. Any other questions? I hope it gave you sort of an idea of what it's about. You learned a few more things about Excel. Oh, that's good, Chris. Okay, then I'll just leave you with this final screen. I'll just put it up here in case anybody. Oh, thank you, Lise. That's so sweet. That's so nice. You just made my day. I love teaching. So if you want to join one of the classes, we'll have fun. Seriously, the whole day of training, we'll have fun. But I'll put this up on the screen. So if you want any information, here's all of our information. And thank you so much, everybody, for coming to this. Hopefully the next webinar will be more of a slower pace, but, I hope you got a lot out of today's webinar. You guys have a great afternoon and weekends coming up. Take care, everybody. Bye, everyone. You're so welcome. I'll just leave this up while you guys are disconnecting.